So Anthropic just dropped Claude Design recently, and it's been taking the internet by storm. In this video, we're going to go behind the hype and take a look into what's real, what it can do, and if it's actually that much of an upgrade depending on your role. I'm also going to walk you through how to use Claude Design effectively, what the different commands mean, and how to set up your space correctly so you get on-brand design every time. We're doing two use cases today. One for a pitch deck or Instagram carousel style, and another of an app prototype, which is a little bit more advanced. Real quick, if you find videos like these useful, hit that like button and consider subscribing. It really does help a lot. Now let's get into it. So of course, the first place you want to go to is to go to Claude.ai on your web browser. Now, as far as I know, Claude Design is only available on the web browser version, so it doesn't work on the Claude desktop just yet, since it is a research preview. So you have to go to the web browser version, and once you go over to Claude.ai and get signed in, and of course you need the Pro plan to be able to access this on your web browser, you'll see that on your left sidebar here, that there's a design option, and you want to hit that, and that'll bring you to Claude Design. I've already got a few projects set up over here so that I don't have to run it and we have to wait for it later on. But I just want to point out that when you first log in, it's going to ask you to set your brand standards, your organization information, stuff like that. It's oftentimes going to be inbuilt into what we call the design system. So you'll see that every single thing that I will want to create here, as you can see, there's prototype, there's slide deck, there's templates and others. There's always some form of design system that's asking you to attach it to. Now, what is this design system? Well, this is basically just the brand standard or the brand guidelines that you can implement into Claude Design as your default. And of course, this could also vary from projects to projects. This is super important if you are trying to hit on-brand design every time. So here in the design system, you'll see that it's going to ask you to fill in your company name. You can even put in your GitHub repo if you have one. You can link it to Claude Code in your computer, and that's of course the upside of using Claude Design here, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But what's interesting is you can upload a Figma file that you're working on, and you can just basically drag and drop, and it could actually start working off from there in terms of extracting the typography, the brand guidelines, the brand systems, the mood, etc. Of course, if you already have some assets, logos, you can drop it in here. Essentially, that becomes your design backbone, which would make sure that whatever is designed is following that particular design system. So I think to me, this is one of the differentiator of Claude Design. Of course, when we talk about what Claude Design is really, it is creating HTML, PowerPoint files the same way Claude Code or Claude Cowork could have already done at this point. And if you've been following the channel, you know that we can connect Claude Code or Claude Cowork into, Canva MCP or PowerPoint or Gamma to help you create PowerPoints. And of course, there's also Figma connectors that you can already connect with Claude Cowork even before Claude Design. So the question is, what's so different about Claude Design, right? Is it just a package UI the same way Claude Cowork is a package UI for Claude Code so that non-technical people wouldn't find it too intimidating and are able to use it more effectively? Well, that's certainly one primary function, but the second one is really this system design right here, where if you define a design system, like for example, use this particular font or use this particular shade of color, it's going to be stored as a type token, which means it's not parsing through just a markdown files. So in layman's speak, in Claude Cowork or Claude Code, when you tell it, hey, this is my design system, it is only stored as a markdown file that it refers to from time to time, right? So what happens is after numerous runs, it's going to start drifting a little bit more and a little bit more. It's of course most of the time not a problem. It's not going to show up immediately. After numerous runs, it might start getting the wrong thing. Meanwhile, if you have a design system, there's no way that it's going to get the wrong thing because it's parsed through as a type token. So this feature of element anchored context is to me one of the most important feature that is an advantage of having Claude Design. Apart from, of course, now it's much easier to use for graphic designers and marketers and non-technical developers, right? So now let's go ahead and ask it to create a slide deck, right? And in the design system, again, I have not put in any information for this particular demo. I'm just going to create the deck from scratch and have it figure out what to put in there, the styles and stuff like that. Okay, I'm going to give it some reference point later on, but let's see. So here I'm going to ask Claude Design to create a slide pitch deck for a Scandinavian-inspired interior design company called Nordum. Use the style, typography, mood lighting of this particular IG channel. So this is the IG channel that I particularly like. I like the fonts. I like the way they took the pictures and the style and the mood. So I just want to recreate that sort of style and mood feel, but in this case for a Scandinavian interior design company. So let me just send it that without having it ingest any design system or anything like that. And here's what's interesting about Claude Design, and is that it's always going to ask you for some clarifying questions. Who's this pitch for, etc., and how long do you want the pitch deck to be, typography, and this is particularly true for any type of work that you want it done, whether it be the wireframe, prototype, app, stuff like that. But here, I'm just going to fill in some of the questions here. So I say this is for prospective clients, speaking like 10 minutes, palette direction, just going to pick that. Okay, imagery approach, living room, placeholder northern lights, narrative arc, brand story, copy tone, quiet, poetic. Okay, anything else about northern, which tweaks, toggle palette. Okay, maybe typography pairing as well. Okay, cool. So basically I've responded to all the clarifying questions that Claude Design has. So I'm going to hit continue and it should start working on it. Again, what you notice as it works through the project is that it will be iterative, right? So it'll come out with a few steps in terms of what to do. But at the same time, it's not going to go through all those steps completely because it knows that design is an iterative process. So halfway through, it's going to kind of stop, sort of just check in to see if it's going the right direction. And most of the time, as a designer, you're going to want to tweak a couple of things. So it knows to stop at the right juncture so that you're still able to make the necessary changes without it generating the whole 8 slides and then later on realizing that everything is incorrect. And maybe that's also valuable when it comes to just simple slide decks. But if you go into an app prototype, that's super valuable because you don't want to build out the entire app and later on realize that, hey, you're going into a completely wrong direction. It's going to take a lot of time and token to redo all of that. So, all right, as it's working through that, as you can see, it's coming out with the slides here with a certain type of design and brand philosophy that it's kind of coming up with based on my responses and stuff like that. So here there are a couple of things going on, right? First, of course, you've got the design file tabs here, which all the files, in terms of component elements and stuff like that gets stored. But then here there's a visual panel where you can actually look at the slides and be able to select the elements, right? And then, of course, you have the chat bar here on the left-hand side corner where you can chat with it and tell it, hey, on slide 2, this is not done well, or I want to change a certain particular font or particular color. But if you go to your top right-hand corner, you'll see that there are a couple things here, the tweaks, the comments, the edit, the draw. And for the tweaks, it's actually this panel here. So if you toggle off tweak, that will go away. If you toggle it on, it'll be right here. And what it does, it basically gives you predetermined options of what you can choose from just for you to visualize, to see, like, for example, this is a color template so that you might be able to see what the color combination is, and also typography, just for you to kind of play around with the fonts and all that and see how it all goes. But if you don't want that in your panel, you can just turn that off. And what's interesting, again, is the comment feature here, which I think is super powerful because this is where you can select a particular element. So for example, if I were to hit comment and pick one of the panels here and say, hey, I want this, I like this to be black, whatever, right? I can comment that and it will go into a comment bar here. This is not necessarily sent to Claude yet. This is just being queued. So you can make multiple comments, right? You can say, hey, make this modular or block, for example, and I could hit comment and it'll go to that. So why is this different from just chatting to Claude Design on the chat panel? Well, it's because when you chat with Claude Design or even Claude Cowork or Claude Code, it is interpreting as words, right? So what it does is it's trying to infer which particular element you're talking about. But here you can actually click on the exact element. Instead of just telling it, hey, move the CTA up by 2 inches or whatever, you can click on the element and say, hey, I want this in blocks, right? I want this in whatever color. And the superpower to that is that it will then change only that particular element and it won't affect any other element, right? Instead of if you're just chatting with it, there is that off chance of it kind of tweaking other elements as it goes, trying to revise to get to where you want it to be. So once you put in all the comments, what you can do is you can actually checkbox the comments that you want to send to Claude Design and hit send to Claude Design. And essentially, Claude is then going to work on those comments simultaneously, and then it will make the changes to those elements. So while it's doing that, we can run through the edit element. So for edit, it is pretty straightforward. It is what a lot of graphic designers would be familiar with on Figma or on Canva. You click on the element, and essentially you can change the size, the fonts, what color it is by yourself. So there's no call to the LLM or to Claude when you're doing this. You're actually changing it yourself the way you would on any graphic design platform like Canva, etc. This is just a simple, easy way if you have something straightforward, if you already know what you want to do and you can do it yourself, right? So this is just kind of a self-serve component. And then of course, last but not least, there's a draw component. Now draw component basically gives you a design pencil where you can actually draw directly on the visual panel here. So for example, you want selected works to be moved over to the middle. You can do that and you can just essentially type, move this to the middle, right? And again, you can hit enter on that and it will become one of the components that is queued for it to work on, right? As it's working on those things. And also, for example, if you want let's say this to be, swapped over, let's say swap these two positions. Okay, and then once that's all done, we're going to send it over to Claude, right? It's working through all of that. Again, there's already a new version as it was changing what I was telling it to previously. So I'm going to just refresh that. Now, as you can see, it changed it to black, and I don't think it quite got what I wanted out of portfolio. But yes, you can see, it started changing that. And maybe if I want, I can just change portfolio myself and see if I could, let's say if I want to just change the color, I can change it to green, whatnot, right? And let's see if we're able to make the changes to the swap and move the selected works to the middle. Yep, there we go. So it was able to move the selected works in the middle just from me drawing it and giving it. It did get the swap wrong here. So yeah, again, it is not a silver bullet. Sometimes you still need to work with it. But I think it's still much more effective working it on a visual panel this way than in Claude Code, where the only choice you have is kind of just chat with it, right? Like move that particular element, whichever way to the left. And yes, sure, some people would prefer to work with that. But for most graphic designers and marketers who are more visual, this is a much simpler way for them to work effectively and be able to visualize things directly on the UI. So now, of course, those are just pitch decks. And if you want to create other assets like carousel for Instagrams and stuff like that, you're able to also use kind of the same method. Just tell it that, hey, I like this Instagram channel and I wanted to use that particular typography, brand style, mood, etc. But for my particular business, these are the type of carousels that can be created. Again, I did not actually give it that much design style or design system, which if you are a business, you'd have a very comprehensive write-up of what that looks like. So I'm just running a demo here, so I wanted to just show what it can do. And right now, the export format here are limited to PDF, PPT, Canva, and zip file, and HTML. So what you can do is actually just send it to Canva, right? So send it to Canva and you can do your final editing there and be able to push it to Instagram. So of course, there are many other design work that you can use Claude Design for. And arguably one of the most useful is to come up with an app or a landing page prototype. And there are two options here. You can build up a wireframe or a high fidelity prototype of the app. So in this case, I've actually built a demo prototype of an app. And this is kind of just for fun. It is a vehicle visualization app where you can interact with it. It's an interactive prototype. And the point is when I hover over some of the car parts here, it will tell me, where the car parts is within a particular vehicle, right? So if you're an automobile engineer, stuff like that, maybe this is useful, for you to visualize where things are and stuff. And so this looks a bit more complex. It did take a lot more token for it to kind of spin something up like this. And the tweaks itself are a little bit more impactful as well. Sweep speed is basically just how fast this rotating thing is going. Accent hue, you can change the accent hue right here. Body opacity of the actual car, we can change that accordingly as we like. And of course, when you're working on something a bit more complex like this is where you want to ideally be able to use the elements that we talked about earlier, right? So for example, if we're looking at this right here and I say, hey, the wheels are not too visible, I want to be able to comment just on the wheels, right? Instead of me having to chat with Claude and tell it, the wheels, and it may not fully understand which wheels we're talking about. So I can just comment on this, hey, make this, let's say, white in color, and it'll be able to just change that particular set of wheels and, not change everything else. Well, so it looks like I've actually selected the wrong body part. I've actually selected the body of the car instead of the wheels, and now it's changing it into white color here. I'm not going to rerun this because it does take tokens. And again, this is just kind of for fun. And I just kind of misclicked on the body part earlier instead of the wheels. But what I do want to show is once we're done with an app like this is just a front end. And what it means is this is just a cover for what's going on the back end, which is actually running some form of operations. So for an app like this, for example, maybe what you want to be able to do is to be able to simulate the exhaust capacity or the fuel usage and stuff like that, depending on, so when I say fuel usage is obviously battery pack, like electrical usage, energy usage and stuff like that. And in order to do this, there is some form of mathematical operation that's running on the back end. So that is basically the program that you would have coded or vibe coded on, let's say, Claude Code. And you've done so, what you can do is actually just push this directly onto Claude Code. And you can easily do that by going to share over here, and essentially you can hand off to Claude Code right here. And so when you do a handoff to Claude Code, a couple things happen. So it is a package URL pointed at Anthropic infrastructure, right? Claude Code is going to receive a pre-formatted prompt, and inside the package is a couple of things, the HTML, CSS, JS file that's going to be sent into Claude Code with the conversation history that you have with Claude Design, and also a README file, which is basically a compilation of what this whole front-end structure looks like and how it's going to plug into the existing code base, right? So it's going to have all of that, so it's going to hand off actually quite nicely onto Claude Code. And we're not going to cover that today in this video because I'm not sure how many of you are actually actively using Claude Code. So to recap, is Claude Design completely new in terms of capabilities compared to what we already have with Cowork and Claude Code? Well, not actually, because it's actually using the underlying capabilities that we already have, but with a few components add on that are super important. Like I mentioned, the structured and interpretive state, which just ensures that you have consistent brand design instead of just markdown files, which is just more of an inference, and that minimizes the drift, right? So drift basically just means going outside of the guardrails that you've set in place in the first place. So how does this benefit? Of course, the visual panel itself is going to benefit people or teams that are designers and marketers who won't really want to use Claude Code. So this new feature is going to be a game changer for those teams. However, for solopreneurs or people who are already familiar with Claude Code or developers themselves, well, they probably look at this and think that, hey, this is just a visual interface for whatever that I already have in Claude Code. So for the technical folks, it's probably a nice to have, but for designers and marketers, this is genuinely a game-changing capability. So what do you think about Claude Design? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you're using it for anything new, fresh, cool, also let us know. And of course, if you find videos like this useful, please consider subscribing and hit that like button. And I'll see you on the next one.